شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك لبيك.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. This year, the month of Dhul Hijjah has arrived, but in exceptional circumstances. The Quran says, Al-Hajju Ashhurun Ma'lumat. The annual pilgrimage to the house of God is to be performed in specific months, the month of Dhul Hijjah. But this year, mankind has been afflicted by a specific bala, the COVID-19 pandemic, which will prevent many from going for pilgrimage. In the holy month of Ramadan, we prayed earnestly to God to be given the tawfiq to be able to go for pilgrimage. وَارْزُقْنِي حَجَّ بَيْتِكَ الْحَرَامِ. But it was the decree of God that this year there would be a specific test for mankind. Hajj is an important pillar of the Islamic faith. The Quran discusses about Hajj in more than 20 different surahs, in more than 100 different verses. Major surahs like Baqarah and Ali Imran and Ma'idah and Tawbah and Ibrahim and Surah Hajj itself and Surah Fatih. They've got verses, many verses discussing about different aspects of Hajj. So the big question is the health restrictions which prevent us from going to Hajj. Incidentally, all the wajib rituals that are obligatory on mankind by God, the all-wise, the all-kind, the all-loving, the all-merciful Lord, which have been laws which have been designed to enable us to grow spiritually and to get closer to Him. All these laws are restricted by health conditions. So our daily prayers, if the performance of wudu is harmful to an individual by water, then his duty is not to perform wudu, but to perform tayammum. Or prayers itself, if a person cannot stand up, medically disabled or unable, then he has to pray sitting down. If he cannot, then lying down. If cannot lying down in different positions, then in whatever capacity he can. Or as in our COVID pandemic times, when there are deaths which occur, if the handling of the mayyit is going to be a risk for the health of the living, then the ghusl of the mayyit becomes tayammum of the mayyit. If the shrouding by the kafan and the salatul mayyit and the dafn have their health restrictions, all of these will be modified to accommodate the health and the safety of the living. Fasting. فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مَرِيضًا. If you are sick in the month of Ramadan, then you don't fast. فَعِدَّةٌ مِّنْ أَيَّامٍ أُخَرٍ. You pay qada later on. Or likewise for Hajj. If health restrictions do not allow an individual to go for pilgrimage, then Hajj is no longer obligatory. In fact, the prevention to perform Hajj and the restrictions existed even most of the Prophet's period of ministry in Mecca and in Medina. It was in the 8th year of hijrah that the conquest of Makkah took place, and therefore the opportunity opened up for Umrah and for Hajj to be freely done. And this is referred to, the prevention of performance of Hajj and Umrah is referred to in the Quran in different surahs. In Surah Baqarah, in Surah Ma'idah, in Surah Hajj, in Surah Fatih, that there was Saddun an Sabilillah wal Masjid al Haram, that the pagans who controlled Mecca restricted you Muslims and the Prophet ﷺ from coming to perform Hajj. In fact, even after the 8th year of Hijrah, if a person enters into Ihram with the niyyah of doing Umrah or Hajj, but for some reason is prevented, even that scenario has been mentioned in the Quran. In Surah Baqarah, Allah says, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Once you enter into Ihram, then you must perform all the rituals necessary to complete the Hajj and Umrah, and then you can remove the Ihram. فَإِنْ أُحْصِرْتُمْ فَمَا اسْتَيْسَرَ مِنَ الْهَدِيِ. But if for whatever reason you are prevented from completing the rituals, either external reasons, there are authorities who restrict you, or no, internal reasons, you have fallen sick and you cannot complete in the state of Ihram the rituals of Hajj or Umrah, then there's an alternative which is suggested. So the situation of restrictions of performing Hajj is nothing new. The Quran has predicted it. And in fact, over history, more than 1,000 years, there have been occasions where because of external reasons or health reasons, there has been a reduction in the numbers of pilgrims who go for Hajj or Umrah. So what do we do in this situation? There are some ibadat for which there is an alternative available. But Hajj is a unique experience, a once-in-a-lifetime experience where Allah says in Surah Hajj that وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ يَأْتُوكَ رِجَالًا وَعَلَى كُلِّ ضَامِرٍ يَأْتِينَ مِنْ كُلِّ فَجٍّ عَمِيقٍ لِيَشْهَدُوا مَنَافِعَ لَهُمْ. There's a specific real-time experience in going for Hajj. There are manafi', there are great number of benefits. In fact, uncountable number of benefits. In fact, even unrecognizable benefits in performing Hajj and Umrah. Some of which are that Muslims come from all over the world. They come to know each other, they interact with each other, they exchange information, there is trade and commercial interaction, it removes negativity and misunderstanding, it purifies an individual, there's collective worship that takes place, there is revisiting of the early history of Islam, there is visiting of the land in which the Quran was revealed, there is the spiritual development of knowing God better, getting close to God, purifying and cleansing oneself, developing virtues of friendship, of forbearance, of increasing one's faith, of detaching from the dunya, of strengthening one's conviction in the hereafter, of a practical demonstration of the ideal Muslim practicing God-worshipping, God-fearing, God-obedient Muslim community. Hajj is an experience. لِيَشْهَدُوا. They have to come and see, they have to come and witness, they have to come and experience Hajj. But if there are restrictions, then at least we can make the niyyah. God in His grace and mercy and love has decreed that whosoever makes the niyyah of a good act, and then for some reason, either because he lacks the means and the resources, or there are external obstacles for which he cannot implement that niyyah, Allah will reward that niyyah. Niyyatul mu'mini khayrun min amali. The niyyah of a mu'min is definitely better than the action of the mu'min, because the mu'min, He believes in God's unlimited grace and mercy. He wishes and aspires to get more and more from God. In fact, to get the best. A God who is unlimited in His treasures. لا يزيده كثرة العطاء إلا جودا وكرما. In the dua of iftitah, which we recited in the holy month of Ramadan, we declare that God's unlimited bountifulness is such that the more He rewards, unlike human beings whose accounts will diminish by sharing and giving out, the more God gives, the more His treasure fills up, because it is unlimited, because He is wasi', because He is dhul quwwatil mateen. So a mu'min should make the niyyah that had I had the means and the resources, and if there were no obstacles, I definitely am determined to do Hajj. Allah recognizes, Allah acknowledges, Allah will reward that niyyah, insha'Allah. But beyond that, if truly a person is sincere to want to go for Hajj and to be able to achieve the manafi' and to accomplish the benefits of Hajj, then it is important to remind ourselves that the pilgrims should remind themselves that what are some of the benefits they could have obtained had they actually gone for Hajj. So wearing the ihram, the white dress, a sense of equality and respect for all humanity. Wearing the white dress, white to represent a clean, pure intention in relationship to others. Going for tawaf around the Kaaba, the intention is to pivot our whole life and all our activities towards God and towards pleasing God and moving towards Him and away from anything which is ungodly. To come and pray Salatul Tawaf after completion of the 7 rounds behind Maqam Ibrahim means that I take Ibrahim alayhi salam as my Imam. In all those devotions and submission and sacrifice and love of God that he had, I wish to follow on his path. To go for sa'i between Safa and Marwa is to display the desire to serve humanity. Bihajar, it is said that in order to save the little innocent, helpless infant, she struggled to get some water for him. The desire to serve humanity with sincerity, with sense of service and sacrifice is the spirit of sa'i between Safa and Marwa. To go Arafah to increase our ma'rifah, to go to Mash'arul Haram, to get a sense of shu'ur and closeness to God, to go to Mina and to stone the pillar which represents the shaitan, is to fight against the external enemy who will block us from reaching God. To sacrifice the animal as a symbol of sacrificing our internal animalistic greedy desires. To shave the head as a sign of removing any sense of self-beauty and to devote ourselves to the absolute beauty and perfection of the Lord. These are some of the benefits, spiritual benefits, that we could acquire, we could ponder upon and try to reflect and try to achieve even if we haven't been for Hajj. The sense of unity and equality on a smaller scale compared to Hajj is achieved on a weekly basis in the Salatul Jumu'ah, in the daily occasions of Salatul Jama'ah. Even in COVID times, by adhering to the health protocols, by keeping social distance, by wearing a mask, by avoiding physical contact, we can still perform some of these congregational acts of worship. But I would like to point out and remind ourselves of one other alternative for those of us who have not been able to go to Hajj. Interestingly, in the hadith, there is indication of certain acts, good deeds, which can be performed, which are almost equivalent. In fact, they are even more in reward compared to Hajj. The spirit of Hajj can be captured and can be displayed by carrying out these equivalent alternative acts. So, for example, the hadith says that whosoever reaches out and goes out and helps a mu'min brother, then they will be rewarded with the reward of Hajj. Mashyul muslimi fi hajatil muslimi khayrun min tawaf. Qada'u hajatil muslim khayrun min tawafin wa tawafin wa tawafin. To help fulfill the needs of another brother is better than the reward of 1 tawaf and 2 tawaf and 3 tawafs and on and on. Imam alayhi salam counts till 10 tawafs. Another hadith says it's not helping a needy brother is not only better than tawafs, it's better than the whole of Hajj. So it seems the spirit of Hajj, to be together, to engage in collective worship, to feel a sense of equality, to feel a sense of sharing and compassion and caring for somebody else, that spirit of Hajj can be captured even if we don't go for Hajj, if we reach out, especially in these COVID times, reach out to our needy brothers. Finally, one other hadith mentions that if you can't go for Hajj, you could go for ziyarah of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and the ziyarah of other Imams alayhi salam. And that is equivalent to Hajj. In fact, 10 Hajj, in fact, 20 Hajj, in fact, multiple numbers of times of Hajj. Essentially, if we can't reach Baytullah, the Kaaba, then we should strive to reach the Waliyullah, the representative of God on the earth, to commit ourselves to recognize him and his status, godly appointed status as the representative on the earth, to commit ourselves to understand his teachings and his lifestyle, and to commit ourselves to follow that. That will achieve the ultimate purpose of Hajj, which is to get us closer to God through his representative. Indeed, the Quran says in Surah Al-Hadid, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلَنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ. And we sent our messengers, and we sent the message, and we sent the mizan to enable you to distinguish the right from wrong. And وَأَنزَلْ, all of this was done لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, so that there's qiyam and there is collective effort by mankind to establish justice on the earth under the leadership of the message of God and the messenger of God and the successors after the messenger of God. وَلِيَعْلَمَ اللَّهُ مَنْ يَنصُرُهُ وَرُسُلَهُ بِالْغَيْبِ. So Allah will test the whole of mankind. Who is willing? Who has understood God's plan for mankind, God's message that he has sent, God's messenger and the living successor, the Imam Ajjalallahu Faraja, who is alive and who commits himself to follow that path. May Allah give us tawfiq to be able to live the spirit of Hajj, to make the niyyah of going for Hajj whenever circumstances allow, to be able to reach out to humanity and to mankind and to needy people, and to be able to commit ourselves to God's representative on the earth so that we can collectively establish justice and equality and godly virtues on the earth. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.